Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Marketing Mondays. I'm Patric Fransko, Aaron West. We are eager to answer your questions today that came into Marketing Mondays. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We're ready to get the week kicked off. We've got some great questions already queued up. But as always, if you're watching, go ahead and put your questions in the comments. We can see those come across our screen while we're live. So if we get a question from you, we will definitely try to answer it during the episode today. So with that, I'm going to invite or ask Ronnie to go ahead and cue in, and we'll get going because we got a lot of questions to go through. We try to keep these nice and tight at 30 minutes. So let's get going.
Yeah, no problem. Good to see you, and good to see everybody that's here. I already got a few people in. So to get it started, we had somebody write in, what type of content should we be focusing on to attract new customers? So obviously there's lots of different ways to do that, especially if you're new or if you've been existing. What are some good ways to get new people in?
As far as, so basically they're asking what type of content they should be using to attract new people. Is that what the question is?
Yeah, this is kind of a general question. I didn't know if they meant like social media wise, or obviously we've talked a lot about Google My Business and kind of focusing on trying to at least create some SEO content, which I think would be probably one of the first things to do, like we mentioned before, is to make sure that you've built out your Google business page and then actually loading content into that. It's not, there's places to put images and videos and text, might not use it as much as maybe a social media. So at least that's where I would start, and I'm assuming you probably would agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The thing that threw me a little bit was they were talking about new customers. So what I'm thinking they're trying to do is attract people that aren't currently aware of their page or aren't following their page, things like that. So one of the things I think about is a lot of times we get in this silo with whatever industry you're in. We get in a silo where we tend to think about things all the same way. When you're trying to attract new people in that are interested, you have to try to take yourself out of your current seat and think about it from somebody that's watching it. Why would somebody want to watch your content? Why would somebody want to follow your page? Why would somebody be interested in what you're doing? In your mind, you may think, oh, it's obvious I do X and Y and Z. Why wouldn't they want to follow me? But the reality is you have to give somebody a compelling reason, especially with all the noise there is online right now. You know, whether it's, you have to grab somebody's attention quick, and then you have to give them a reason to stay. So one of the things you see that's working really well for people is to show people things in somewhat of an entertaining way. I've been consuming a lot of different influencer content recently to just try to find some trends and things like that. And it's not always the most dynamic person that's getting the most followers or whatever, but it's with a person that kind of taps into what people are interested in and then delivers content that feeds into that. So if you're in the automotive window film industry, or window tint industry, don't just try to give them a picture of a tinted car and say, buy window tint from me. I mean, give them a reason why, like something where you're going to grab somebody's attention and then they're going to see your content and say, I want to know more about that, or that's different than I've ever seen it explained before. I think that's how you're going to attract new people to your page. Ideally, think about it from a standpoint that if somebody has no interest in what you're doing at all, is the content you're creating or the ads you're creating or whatever you're doing compelling enough that somebody would care? Always ask yourself the question, take a step outside of your business and ask yourself the question, why should I care? I think if you ask yourself that and you don't have a really good answer, the chances are the person watching it also is not going to care.
Yeah, it's funny. As soon as you started mentioning that, to me, it's if you're going to look for new people, and obviously we've talked about Reels and TikToks and how that algorithm works, but I think the core of it is to be yourself, be the character that you are, be your personality. One of the guys I saw had crazy clothes, and typically that's either going to attract and pull people in, or it's going to repel people away. And typically that's what you want. And he made a comment about you don't want to be liked. You want to be either loved or hated. And so people are either going to
True.
love your content and they're going to like what you're saying, whether it's because of your personality or being eccentric, you've got crazy clothes, your hair is all colored. I know, like, I watch Ryan Pineda and he says that he has his hair every other week. It's a different color. He's a real estate guy. And he says the reason he did that was, one, it invoked a reaction from people. And it was one of those things, whether they hated the fact that he was changing his hair or they liked it. And I think,
man, it's funny you say that, because there's a guy that my friend and I both are aware of that's in the 4x4 overlanding community. And I'm not going to say his name, because if anybody knows the person, I don't want, but the person actually, he's an older person, probably about my age, but he has his hair colored like in a different color than, like a non-natural color. And the crazy thing was, I didn't necessarily care for it. And my immediate reaction was like, why is this guy got his hair colored? Just like, and my buddy I was talking to had the same reaction, but we both knew who he was. Yeah. We both consumed some of his content, even though we both kind of had this, not necessarily a positive feeling about the guy. We both knew, like when I mentioned him, we both knew who it was and we had both consumed his content. So to your point, he grabbed our attention. He was memorable. We remembered him. We consumed some of his content.
And I think even if it is something where you're running a tint shop or you have a small business, it's almost the fact that your product or service is secondary to who you are. And that's what we've been trying to do. Obviously we were talking about this before of taking this content, breaking it up, and hopefully we're finding the people that want to take this content in. Maybe we're not crazy. I try to switch up my shirt every time to make sure it's not the same. And so there's different things that we can do. But the fact is that we're trying to connect with people that are looking for this. And that's essentially what you want to be doing to find new people. It's, you want to attract new people in by being yourself and not trying to just walk this line to try to please everybody, because everybody's not going to be your customer.
Well, and you hit the nail right on the head too with the statement, be yourself. Because I think if you have something like this person's colored hair or whatever the case may be, but it's true to who you are, or it's true to your personality, then I think go for it. But don't try to like come up with something like, I wonder if I did this, maybe I can grab some people's attention. It's got to be true to your DNA, or ultimately it's not going to resonate with people. So while I think you ought to be considering things that could grab somebody's attention and pull them in and engage them, don't do something that's not true to who you are just to try to gain, because ultimately that's not gonna, you got to be true. If you're really true to yourself, you're going to attract the right people potentially that are going to want to watch that content. So,
and people will typically sniff out if you're trying to be fake, or that's kind of, if it's something that you really want to do, it's going to wear you out. Like if it's not the person that you are, if you're not a high energy person and you come on here and you do all this, you're going to be burnt out after 2 or 3 times doing the different content. It's like, that's why just stick with who you are, but try to inform and educate and entertain as best you can, but do it in your way that's going to pull people in. And if you have other things that are going on, whether it's hair, clothes, music or whatnot in the background, or you have crazy backgrounds or you're in cool spots, you're going to pull people in. So that's at least what we try to be, authentic as best you can. But obviously if you can be the fringes of yourself, because at the end you're going to be pulling people that are going to attract you, and coming with that is you're going to have people that aren't going to like you, and that's okay. And that's part of the process. And you're, like I said, you're not going to get every person's dollar in the world out there. And we can't all be Apple or Amazon, and even them, they're not getting everybody that's in the world either. So it's one of those things, just be yourself.
Yeah. And I think that, again, if you go to industry conferences, you do anything like that, ultimately people are going to meet you and things like that. So if you're totally not in person, is this persona that you put on, if you will, online, whatever, or if a customer comes into your shop, if you're a retail shop and they've been pulled in by this crazy social media persona you've created, and then they meet you and that's not who you are. So it's going to be a little bit of a disconnect. So I think you're always better off just trying to be yourself, for sure.
All right. So our next question, is how should we split up our marketing budget across different channels and platforms? And so that was something we discussed today with a client about, should we focus on just Google AdWords? Should be there, like, how do you kind of put together your strategy as far as where you're going to put your money in if you're boosting Facebook posts or YouTube shorts or wherever you're kind of wanting to get at people?
Great. It's a great question. Again, I mean, in an ideal world, you might be able to do a variety of different things. I think the first step you have to ask yourself is, what is your current budget? Not the budget you hope to be able to spend, but what is your current budget? And then asking yourself, what is the best place to put that budget? Like, where are you going to get the best return on that budget right now? For some people that are really tapping out, like Google, they feel like they're doing a really good job and they're getting really good return on Google, but they're not running out of budget, because Google will tell you if your budget is running out during the middle of the day. Let's say you're doing a really good job with Google, you're not running out of budget, but you still have additional money to spend. That might be an indication where you might be able to take some additional budget and go to someplace like Meta and run some ads over there, or TikTok or something like that. But I always tell people, make sure you're pick the platform that makes the most sense for you, is going to give you the best return, and make sure you're doing that well first. Because if you're not doing that well, it doesn't make sense to continue to spread money over more things. And then reality is, all these things take a certain amount of money to, take a certain amount of money to be beneficial. So if you spread your budget too thin, you may find yourself in a situation where nothing seems to be working, but it's not because the platforms you're using or the structure of your ads or anything like that. It's just like you're not giving them enough money to work. Certain types of Meta ads typically require at least $10 a day to have an effectiveness. So that's $300 a month right there. So if you don't have $300 a month, I wouldn't advise running those types of ads, because you're not giving it enough budget to be effective. So you may try to run them on $5 a day or whatever the case may be. They don't prove to be effective, and you say, oh, that doesn't work, where the reality is you just didn't give those ads enough budget to work.
Yeah, I think especially with bigger companies, it's one of those things where you can have the budget to kind of move those things around and say, hey, I want to, obviously, having learned from you and being a part of this, I think Google AdWords are very important if you have the budget to kind of put that, if you actually have like a marketing budget to kind of go and like, hey, these are the keywords I want to hit. But I think if a lot of times there might be guys out there with, I've only got $25 a month, then it might be something where, okay, let's figure out what works best. Like, look at your organic posts. If you've been posting on social media, figure out, I want to post this one for maybe a few days and just kind of see what kind of response I get at a lower amount. So there is different ways to kind of go about your budget, but obviously it's understanding how much do I have to spend every month, because if all of a sudden you have $200-300, then maybe investigate how Google Analytics work and how to do the Google AdWords, because obviously Google is going to be the biggest search engine. So people are looking for something, you can get in front of them. But again, if you don't have that much, focusing on reels and trying to boost stuff out to people that don't already follow you might be the best agenda for you to try.
Well, and I always try to say to people too, like with AdWords, even if you're in a tight community, which not a huge population. So I'm using the smallest case scenario, let's say for Google AdWords, you're still going to want to spend at least $10 a day on Google AdWords. So if you look at that, think about at the bare minimum, even in a small community with, you're not going to, $300 a month is the minimum, technically you're going to be able to spend to get Google AdWords. So to me, in Facebook, I would look at it very similarly. So if you don't have that budget to put towards it, to your point, you might be better off investing some time into things like Instagram Reels or TikTok that you could try to get some traction organically until maybe you have some budget. Because ideally, if you spend too little budget in those platforms, you're not going to get good results. And you may come away thinking that the reason you're not getting good results is because the platforms don't work, when the reality is you just don't have enough budget.
Yeah. And that leads us into the next one as we're kind of trying to move along here is, can you help us better understand the Google Analytics data? So let's say you have the budget, and how are you then putting in the keywords, like we talked about earlier today, the negative keywords. What are some things and focus points that we should be looking at when we start doing Google Analytics and Google AdWords?
I mean, the thing I like to look at with Google Analytics is if you're spending money on advertisement, you can see where the traffic from your website is coming in from, like where the entry point is, where it's coming from. So if you're spending money on Facebook advertising, you should be seeing traffic come into your website from Facebook. You can also see how many pages they visit. You can see the bounce rate, i.e. if they come into your website, they don't like what they see and they leave from the same page, and how long they visited, things like that. So it's a good indicator when you look at the back end of analytics to kind of get an idea of what are people doing, how do people arrive at my site, number one, and what are they doing once they get there. If you have a lot of people arriving at your site, but then they're immediately bouncing out of your site in a very quick period of time, 10, 15, 20 seconds, that to me tells me structurally there's something wrong on your website that's not grabbing somebody's attention and engaging them, and the user experience isn't good, something like that, because you're getting people there. So your advertisements, here's the thing, your advertisements are working because people are coming. Your SEO may be working. Your advertisements maybe work because people are coming, but then they're leaving. So that would be an indication to me that something might be wrong on the website. The user experience or the structure of the website might not be right because people are arriving, but they're not staying. Now, if you're not getting traffic to the website, that's a different problem. Then you need to start looking at your SEO. You need to start looking at your advertisements and try to ask the question, why aren't people coming to my site? So analytics really gives you a baseline indication of what's happening. And then as you dig deeper into analytics, you can look at how long people spend on a page. Do they leave that page and go to another page on your website? All types of different things you can look at. It's way too in-depth to get into in just a short answer to a question. But analytics gives you a good idea of who's coming to your website, what's happening once they get there. And that gives you a pretty good thumbnail sketch of what areas of your marketing need attention potentially.
Let me pull it back a sec too. Should I be using Google AdWords if I don't have a website? Is that something can you direct it to other places, or is having a website kind of the I can't ever say this word, the prerequisite to doing Google AdWords?
You can definitely do AdWords and direct the traffic to, say, a landing page. If you want to build a landing page on a particular platform and run it there, you could even, technically you could send the traffic to any link. You can run call ads on Google AdWords to generate phone calls. So you don't need a website. However, I would say if you don't have a good, solid website, and you want to run Google AdWords, I would look at that as like putting the cart before the horse type of thing. I would probably advise you, even if it's a very slimline website, like a 1 to 3 page website that's really well done, I would advise you to do something like that before you start running AdWords, because it's a little bit awkward. Again, you can send people to a landing page, but again, ideally, I would think you can do a lot more if you're going to pay for AdWords if you're sending people to a website. You could capture their data. You could, run a pixel if you're running social media ads. You could capture that on the back of the website. You could do a little bit of that with a landing page as well. But again, it's kind of like the cart before the horse. If you don't have a website, I'd probably advise you to get that squared away first.
Yeah, that's why I asked. Just want to make sure. It seems like, especially if you're going to be doing that budget wise, it's one of those things, take 3 or 4 months and use that money that you would be spending on Google AdWords to then build a website with someone.
Yeah.
Then you can build out from there. That kind of makes a lot more sense than just saying, hey, let me direct them to my Facebook page or my Google business page. But I think having, at least, like you said, a very slimline website might make a lot of sense to just have something to direct people towards, like we mentioned before with ClickFunnels or something like that. It's you have to put them somewhere, whether it's like your Shopify site or whatever it might be. If you're selling a product, it's how are you getting them there and where are they going, I think is the biggest thing.
And again, we talked a little bit, I think it was last week's show, where I talked about, building on other people's real estate. And the fear that I have is that, if you don't have a website and you don't have a Google business page, you're not really, the minute you say you're running Google AdWords to a funnel page, that only works while you're spending money to run that traffic to the funnel page. There's no organic benefit that's growing for you. There's nothing that's happening that's going to give you long-standing benefit like search engine results or map pack results or things like that. So I always caution people, like, yeah, you can do all those things, but I like to strategize to where while you're doing those things, you're also getting an organic benefit. So if you ever decide to stop spending money on AdWords to drive to a funnel, there's still some benefit in the fact that you've built some really good SEO, or you've built some really good, you've built some really good traction on your Google business page as far as people going there and content you've added there. So to me, I feel like it's a little bit of, again, I don't want to continue to use the same analogy, but if you don't have a website, I would probably say, let's get that dialed in first, even if it's like a really basic website. Some home, you got to have a home base. You got to have a home base for your business.
So now, once somebody has that website set up, how can people optimize their website for mobile users? I know whenever we're kind of building websites, we have the 3 different templates essentially that we're kind of working through, whether it's desktop, tablet, and then mobile. What are some things that you're noticing that can help people with mobile websites?
First of all, several years ago, a lot of companies talked about responsive websites, which meant just like the website kind of understood what device it was being looked at, and it reoriented itself to be optimized for that device. And most websites today are in some way, shape, or form responsive. The difference between that and like what we do is we actually will look at a website specifically from like an iPhone or an Android phone type of perspective, a tablet perspective. And sometimes a responsive website might get everything on the screen, but it might not look as well as it could. So we really look at each individual thing, and we can change the code specifically for each thing so that when you're looking at it on a mobile device, it looks as well as it can look. Tablet, same thing. Desktop, same thing. So you have to assume in 2023, heading into 2024, upwards of 80% of all website traffic is happening on a mobile device of some sort. So if anything, I think you're better off to make a website look great on a mobile device. It needs to look good on a desktop and a mobile device, but it makes no sense to not spend the time to make sure your website looks dynamite and functions dynamite in a mobile environment, because 80% of the people that experience your website are going to experience it on a mobile device. So again, your web developer should be able to help you with this, but it requires a little bit of back-end work. We get a website dialed in to make sure it looks exactly the way we want. And then we literally go through and make sure that we make changes such that it looks exactly the way we want it on a mobile device, a tablet, and so forth. I think I answered the question. I'm not sure. But
yeah, no, I think that falls in line. As you were speaking, I kind of thought of it similar to, granted, obviously it's a lot more skewed in the mobile devices, but understanding like when you're building those things out, realize that everybody's going to be, whether it's on social, the links are going to a mobile device, because more likely than not, if you're on social media, you're probably looking at it on your phone. And so whether it's, you want to have your desktop, obviously you want to have it dialed in, but chances are it's going to be looked at by much more professional people.
Yep.
Versus if you have something, just as far as LinkedIn, I almost like connect those together. And then for social media stuff, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, you're going to be linking obviously to the mobile device. So it's just making sure that you have things laid out correctly. I know when I was first building out, that was kind of the trouble, where my desktop page is kind of the one I would build on. And then the minute, especially with Squarespace, that I would use at the start, and now we use WordPress, but it was a lot more difficult to kind of key in that mobile device page because everything wanted to spread out. It didn't want to work as well. And that might happen with a lot of more cookie cutter website designers or website sites that you're going to come across, and you can go through and I figured out how to do it. but it's a little bit trickier because you kind of have to bounce around. Whereas I know with WordPress, you can kind of see each one kind of shows
and
hey,
make
this
some
is
changes. Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, with responsive websites, they sort of give you that, hey, we'll sort of reorient the website to try to make it look good on mobile. But the reality is a lot of times they don't do a perfect job, if you will. They may do an okay job. So get with your web developer. A good quality web developer should be able to make sure your website looks as good, if not better, on a mobile device than it even does on a desktop, because that's where most people are going to consume your website. So make sure it looks good in that environment.
For sure. And this one, obviously, the last question that we got here, since we're near the end, is very similar to the last one. It's just maybe a little bit different. But how can we improve our conversion rate through our website design? So this might be something more if you're trying to get sales versus just trying to get people to the site. What are some things that you've noticed with obviously probably a lot more of the Shopify accounts? I haven't dealt with a lot of those.
Yeah.
But what are some things that have, as far as design, that can help with conversions?
I mean, the first thing I like to talk about when we're talking about website design is what we refer to as user experience. I mean, looking at your website from a standpoint, when somebody arrives, is there a very logical way that they can navigate through the website? Do they have to try to figure out which pages to go to, or does the website naturally take them so it sort of leads them down a path? So if your website doesn't do that, somebody doesn't want to struggle with your website to figure out where to get the information they want. You ideally want to have a very clear path, and you want to give people a couple paths. Some people really like to use the menu structure to navigate, and other people like to look at your website and they much more visually, like they would rather click on a tactile picture for a particular service or something like that. So you really have to give people a couple of options, because not everybody's the same. And you have to give them a logical way to navigate your website. And then you have to lead them down a path you're trying to get them to do. If you want somebody to fill out a contact form so that you can contact them about giving them a free quote or whatever, provide them multiple stops along the path, along the journey, that the minute they decide, all right, I want to get more information from these people, that there's a readily clickable button or area that they can go to fill that information out. You don't want somebody to get to a point where they're like, okay, I've read enough, I'm interested. Now I got to figure out where I have to go to fill out a form to get that information. So you want to basically have the path or the journey, if you will, through the website be very logical and lead people down a path. And then the minute all along that way, give them options to then convert, whatever convert means. Could be a buy now button. If it's a website where you're trying to sell anything, the minute they've read enough and they decided to buy, there should be a buy now button or something like that, to where they could click over and go into the actual shopping end of it. If it's a filled out contact form, it should be, buttons that lead you to that, or contact forms on the left or the bottom of each page so they can easily basically get to that. So lead them down a path and give them plenty of opportunities to convert the way you want them to convert along the way. You cannot make it hard for them to do it. You can't make it hard for them to navigate. And if they're ready to convert, you can't make it hard for them to figure out how to convert. I'm trying to make it really simple, but those are two really good keys to think about when you're thinking about website design. Is it confusing of how to get where you need to go? And then once they've made that decision, do they have to click over to another page to convert, or do you make it really easy for them to start that conversion process the minute they make the decision that they want to convert?
No, yeah, that's when I first started off, that was kind of the trouble I kept coming into, was I wasn't providing a proper path when I would build these sites. And sometimes you end up in a dead end, and all of a sudden the person's there and they have nowhere to go. They have no back button. It's trying to make sure that you have a way to get people to where they want to go. Like you said, once you kind of go down certain things and like, okay, I agree with this. Now I'm interested. Where do I go? And that's kind of one of those things where if you don't have the buttons or just the links to different spots throughout your website, or just your in general, like the header and footer that would have everything that's kind of there and it's on every page. And that was kind of one of the things I ended up not having all the way set up, was they'd get to a spot and then the bounce rate would be high because there was nowhere for them to go. Yep. And so that's, if you're building it yourself, I think that's kind of one of those really great tips, because a lot of people, whether they don't want to have somebody build it and they're just like, I'm going to try to figure this out myself, yep. which was me. You kind of have to figure out these little things along the way, and we're here to help if that's something that kind of comes across. But yeah, it's having a path and being able to continue the path and split off in different directions and not just be stuck in a dead end or a cul-de-sac as far as my head.
And not just one thing. It's not, if let's say you've got a page that's got a lot of information, it's a long page. It's not just one button or whatever. Give people a variety of ways. Again, just like I said, some people like to navigate with a menu and some people like to navigate with clicking on tactile panels or something like that on a website. So give people even some options there. Like maybe you have, like, if you're trying to drive, if your conversion is requesting a quote, maybe you have a floating request a quote button in the header that's there all the time. But then maybe down in the information, occasionally you have request a free quote button in there as well. So a lot of people might be like, why do I need that there? I have it up in the header. Well, some people not everybody's the same. So you got to look at it. You've got to orient the information the way people want to consume it. It's not about you. It's about the consumer's journey or the website visitor's journey. And you got to give them a couple of different paths. Again, just because your menu structure is perfect doesn't mean that not a lot of people want to go through that. I mean, so think about those two things. And again, if you notice, as you mentioned, that a lot of people are getting, visiting a page and then bouncing and not converting, it might be an indication to you that you're not giving them a good next step. So.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps it up. We're a little bit over, but that's all right. This was Marketing Mondays number 80. And so I'm glad that everybody's been tagging along with all of this. And as I mentioned to Patrick earlier before the show, you're going to see a lot of us on the social medias. So make sure you like it, comment, share it with your friends. If there's something that you feel was really important, we would greatly appreciate you guys doing that. So we'll see you on the socials.
Yeah, absolutely. And seriously, I mean, we really love to answer people's questions. So in any of the groups or anything like that, you could tag Ronnie, tag myself, ask a question. If you didn't get on the show to ask a question live, we're readily available across different platforms. Send us a question via DM, whatever the case may be. We'd love to have your question. We'd love to answer it live on air. But we appreciate you tuning in. We hope this is beneficial to a lot of you. And again, we're here for you. So there's no dumb question. The only dumb question is the one that never gets asked. So please, if you don't want us to use your name, just say, don't use my name, so you can ask a question that you don't want to be embarrassed about. We'd be happy to answer that as well. The most important thing we want to do is answer your question. So,
and chances are there's somebody out there that has the same question. I know that's said all the time, but it's one of those things. We're always so reserved and don't want to make a fool of ourselves, but it's one of those things. Send us a direct message. It won't show up in the feed. And that way we can at least address it and try to answer it, because a lot of these things, we don't expect everybody to know it. And that's why we're here, is to try to help walk you guys through some of the simple stuff and some of the expert stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you next week. Take care.